Hello and welcome to our Monster Chase game. We are going to continue where we left off, and sorry I've been away for a while. I did not post anything for a month or so, but I'm here now, so let us continue and finish our game. So the last time what we did is we have created, or in the last video that I've uploaded, we have created our monsters and created their animations. Now we need to create two spawners. One is going to be here where I'm pointing with my mouse, and another one is going to be here, and they are going to spawn these monsters so that our player will be chased by them. So for that we need to create an empty game object. So under game object, create empty, I am going to position it at 0, 0. For the X and for the Y I'm going to name it spawners, and this is going to be their parent game object, and I'm simply going to right click it and then click on this create empty, and right click it again and again, create an empty game object. This one is going to be the left spawner and this one is going to be the right spawner. And I'm going to take the left spawner and I'm going to position it at -57 and 3 for the y-axis, or -3, excuse me, for the y-axis. And our right spawner is going to be at 57 and -3 the same way. I am going to tag them, so I'm going to, I'm going to add in this label here, so like this, so that we can see them now in the scene where they are. So red for both of them. Of course we can zoom in a little bit, so let me just zoom in, and we can even move them a little bit further. So somewhere around here at 60. So at 60, let me just type it here, not 660. And for our left spawner, it will be -60. So -60. And in our scripts folder, I'm going to create a spawner scripts folder. And inside of it, we have our spawner script. And let me just double click it so MonoDevelop will open it. And here we are going to have a couple of references. The first thing that we are going to do is we are going to create a serialized field. This is going to be a private game object array. And this is going to be our monster reference. So reference, like this. And we are also going to use a list. So we are going to say using Unity System Collections.generic. And a list is the same as an array, except that a list can be resized, because we know that arrays cannot be resized. The size that you give them is the size that you have. You cannot make them or make it smaller or larger after it. But what you can do with the list is you can, well, resize it. As you add more game objects in it, it will be resized. So here I'm going to say private list of game object or game objects, and this right here is called a generic type. And this means that we are specifying for this list that it's going to hold game objects. If we were to put here string, then this will be a list of strings, but we are going to put game objects, so because we are going to put our monsters here, and I'm going to name this one monsters is equal to new list and adding this game object or new list of game objects. I'm going to go here in my Unity editor and I'm going to attach the spawner script on the right spawner and on the left spawner, and I'm going to select both of them now. And for the monster reference, I'm going to put the size at 3, and we are going to go in our prefabs, monster prefabs, and we need to put all of our monsters here. So let me just select my spawners again, and I'm going to put my zombie 1 here and zombie 2 here. And lastly, we are going to put our ghost also here. So this is for the setup, and now we can, well, program our script to actually spawn our monsters. Now here we need to do a couple of things. Before we actually spawn our monsters, we need to create them. So here I'm going to create a void create monsters script. Inside of this script, we are going to instantiate the monsters that we have here and put them in our monsters list. So how can we do that? Well, first we are going to create here int index is equal to 0, and you'll see in a second why. After that, we are going to say here for int I is equal to 0, as long as I is less than monsters, so monsters or monster reference dot length multiplied by 3 increment I. So why am I multiplying it by 3? Well, we have here 3 monsters multiplied by 3, so 3 multiplied by 3, it's 9. So we are going to put 9 monsters in our list array here, because when we go here and when we run the game, what we are going to do is we are going to spawn the monsters from here, so from the left spawner and from the right spawner, and they are going to go like this, and when they reach the other end, which is here, that this is for the right spawner or for the right monster, they are going to come from the right side. So when they reach the end here, then they are going to deactivate themselves. But we are going to use a time interval to spawn our monsters. So if we only put 3 monsters and only 3 of them are running here at the same time, when we try to spawn them again, then we are not going to be able to do that because we don't have inactive monsters. So let us continue to program this and it will be more clear. So here we are having our for loop. So for int I is equal to 0, as long as I is less than monster reference dot length increment I. And now here we are going to actually spawn or create our monsters from our reference and put them in our list. So now we are going to create a game object and we are going to name it monster, and it's equal to instantiate. And here we are going to use our monster reference. So I'm going to instantiate the monster that's at the index. So we are not going to use I here. And why is that? Well, because we see that we have, well, here said as long as I is less than monster reference length multiplied by 3. So that's 9. But here we only have 3 monsters. So if we use I, it will be index out of bounds exception. That's why we are using this index right here. So we are instantiating the monster that's at the index at the transform.position, which will be the position of the spawner, and using quaternion identity. So quaternion identity for the rotation, we are going to say here as game object. Next, we are going to use our monsters list, so monsters, and we are going to add our monster. And also what we are going to do is we are going to say our monsters, which is our list, and the element that's at the index I, which is the current monster here that we are adding. We are simply going to say set active to be equal to false, simply to deactivate that monster. Now what we also need to do, we need to increment this index. So we need to say here index plus plus. And we also need to do one more thing. We need to check if this index is equal to our monster reference dot length. Because if it's equal to that length, we need to reset it back to 0. So we need to say here if our index is equal to monster reference dot length, so length like this, we need to say our index is equal to 0 again. And why is that? Well, each iteration we are going to say index plus plus. So at the moment index is equal to 0. After that the index will be equal to 1. Then index is equal to 2. Up to index is equal to monster reference length multiplied by 3 minus 1. So up to 9. But we don't want that because, as I said, we will get index out of bounds exception. So this is what we need to do, and I can put this here in our start or awake function. So I'm going to put it here, void awake function, and we can test this out. And I will simply uncomment this line of code so that we can see what we are doing here, where we are deactivating our monster. So if I go back here, let me just run the console, or not run the console, actually run the game. So if I go here for the left spawner, we see that we have these monsters. So we have them here and they are running. And we also have, well, these monsters right here, they are going away. But what we need to do, let me just go here, and we need to say monsters and the element that's at index I set active to false. And now if I run the game, we are not going to see any monsters. So we see here that we don't actually see any monsters from the left or from the right spawner. because, as I said, we set him not to be active. So we have created these monsters in the beginning. This is the initial way to create the monsters. Now we need to create a function that's actually going to spawn these monsters one at a time. Now we are going to create an IEnumerator or a coroutine. So here we are going to say IEnumerator, and we are going to name it spawn monsters, which is going to take a float time as an argument. And this is the function that's going to spawn our monsters. So here the first line of code is yield return new wait for seconds. So wait for seconds, and I'm going to say wait time. Now what we need to do is we need to actually spawn our monsters. But here I'm going to say int random index, because we're going to spawn a monster at a random index, is equal to random.range between 0 and our monster's length. So monsters count, because this is a list. We are using our list, we are not using our array. So not this one right here, but this one down here. And now we are going to write a for or while loop. So we are going to say while true, we are going to search for a monster that's not active in the hierarchy. So we are going to say here if our monsters, so monsters, and the element that's at the random index, so random index dot active in hierarchy. But we need to put an exclamation mark here, and this one or this line of code means if the monster is not active in the hierarchy, meaning if the monster is not active here in the scene. So what we need to do, we need to activate it. So we need to say monsters and the element that's at the random index dot set active to be true. And we also need to set its position. So I am going to copy this here. I'm going to say monsters random index transform.position is equal to transform.position, which is the position of the spawner to which this script is attached. And we need to break out of the while loop, or otherwise, because we put here true, we will have an infinite while loop and our game will break. Else, if our monster is active in the hierarchy, meaning it's already chasing the player, we simply need to reassign the random index. So we need to search for another random monster until we find a monster that's actually not active in the hierarchy. The last thing that is left for us to do here is to configure the speed of our monsters, because we know that our monsters here have speed. So what we need to do here is we need to say if our GameObject.name is equal to left spawner. So if this is the left spawner, what we need to do here is we need to simply say our monsters and the element that's at the random index. So random index dot get component, and here we need to get the monster component, and we need to say dot speed is equal to random range between 4 and 10. Else, if this is the right spawner, we are going to do the same thing, but we are going to set the negative speed. And we are also going to change the scale of our monster. So we are going to say monster, the element that's a random index dot transform dot local scale is equal to, and here we need to say new vector 3, and it's going to be -1, 1, and 1. So why we are doing it like this? So first of all, what we are going to do, we are going to go here in our start function. I'm going to remove the update function. So here in the start function, we are going to check if our GameObject name is equal to left spawner. Then I'm going to say here start coroutine spawn monsters, let's say 1 here, and I am going to, let me just go here, so I need to close it, so excuse me for this, and here I am going to say, so else, let me just write it right, so else, having problems here, so anyway, else if it's the right spawner, we are going to wait 2 seconds and spawn these monsters. Also here at the end, we need to call our start coroutine spawn monsters, And we are going to add random range between, let's say, 2 or between 1 and 4. For example, we can change this if we don't want it. We need to end with one more semicolon. So why we are adding negative random range and here negative scale? Well, if I go back here and if we run the game, so let me run the game, we are going to see the monster. So we see monsters spawning here, and we also see these monsters spawning here. So we see them and we see that where they are going. So that's why they're going in the different direction. So we don't need, or we don't want these right monsters to go to the right side. They actually need to go to the left side. And we need to go back here and fix that. Now we saw two problems that we are having here. So when we run the game, we see that our monsters are spawned very quickly, one after another, and we see that these monsters are going to the right side. So how can we fix that? Well, we need to go here, and instead of 1 and 4, we can use 5 and 9, so we will wait longer. And we need to go in our monster script and remove the speed from the start function. Actually remove the start function so we don't need it. And now when I run the game, notice how the monsters are going to go, some of them faster, and these go to the left side. So these from the left side, they go here to the left side, which we see here. And we see that these monsters or the zombie is touching our player. We can actually now play our game, but we will probably be killed by now. But you saw why we are putting here negative speed. So we are putting negative speed and negative vector for our monsters that are on the right side, or otherwise they're going to go to the red side. If I don't do this, if I set here positive and positive, notice now when I run the game where our right monster is going to go. So he's going to the right side. And he has gone. And that's why we need to go back here and put negative scale and negative speed. What we also need to do is we need to put boundaries. So we need to go here, and the same way as we have created our spawners, we need to create boundaries. So I'm going to create an empty game object, and this is going to be our boundaries. And I am going to create two empty childs from our boundaries. So create empty, and this is going to be our left, and this is going to be our right. Both of these are going to have a box collider, so I'm going to attach a box collider 2D on them, of course, and I'm going to resize the collider on the y-axis, so like this, and it's going to be a trigger, and let me put it at 21, and I'm going to take the left one and put him here, and I'm going to take the right one and put him here. So at 62. This one's going to be at 62, and this one is going to be at negative 62. So near the end here. And what we need to do is we need to tag them as boundary. So we need to create here a tag, and we need to say boundary like this. And in our monster script, so we need to go here in our monster script, what we need to do is we need to create void on trigger enter 2D, which takes a collider 2D, which I'm going to name target. And here we are going to check if our target.tag is equal to boundary, then we are simply going to say game object set active to be equal to false to deactivate our monster. Because if we don't do that, if I go back here and if I simply turn off my boundaries, and if I run the game, I'm also going to deactivate the player. So notice now when the monsters go outside, they are going to continue going. So let me just wait, or we need to wait for a second. So look at the ghost. When he goes outside, he will not be stopped. He will simply go away, and we see that he's going infinitely. Also, these monsters, they are going to go away infinitely or touch each other here, which we are going to fix later on, just a second. but we see that they are going away, and then we are going to be left out of these monsters, so we don't have any more monsters to spawn. But if we activate our boundaries, notice now when they go, so now when they reach the boundary, they are going to, well, touch the boundary and deactivate themselves. Let me just deactivate the player. So we need to wait until we see our ghost, because these monsters are touching each other and we need to fix that, and it will be in a second. So notice now when the ghost touches the right boundary, he is going to deactivate itself. So he did not deactivate. Let me just take a look at what is the problem here. Now I see what is the problem. I created a tag, but we did not tag them. So we need to select both of these and set the boundary tag. So now when I run the game, now everything is going to be fine. Let me just select the player and remove them from the scene. And let us wait for the ghost so that we can see our boundaries in action. So here we have a ghost, and just in a second we are going to fix what's happening here with these zombies. So here we have a ghost. Notice now when the ghost touches the left boundary, he is going to deactivate itself. So we see here that he has deactivated itself and he can be respawned again. So that's what was the problem regarding, well, our boundaries. So we did not tag them. The last thing that is left for us to do is to fix why our monsters are colliding with each other. So we see that we have this layer here. And here we can create a new layer, which I'm going to do, and this is going to be our layer for the monster. And this layer can determine which layer collides with which layer. So we are going to go in our prefabs and tag all of our monsters and set their layer at the monster tag. And now we are going to go under Edit, and then Project Settings, and then Physics 2D. And here we are going to uncheck this right here. So we see here we have the monster, and here we also have monster. So unchecking this checkbox means that the monster will not collide with the monster layer. So now any game object that's put on this monster layer will not collide with another game object that's on that same layer. So if I run the game now, notice now when two of these zombies collide, and I'm going to remove the player. Notice now when these two zombies collide with each other, they're simply going to pass through each other because they are not colliding with each other anymore, as we saw in the previous example. And when they reach the end here, the boundary is going to touch them and they are going to be deactivated, which means they can be spawned again. So this video is a really long, I think over 20 minutes, but we can just quickly test out our game. So we have here our player, he can jump over our monsters and over our ghost also, which we see is working nicely. The last thing that we need to do is create our menu, respawn a new player when we select him, and kill our player when we collide with the monsters. So see you in the next video.